Welcome on today's episode of BizDev Live. We have the amazing Aliza Freud with SheSpeaks.com. I'm excited to get into it. She's worked with brands like Hershey's, Prudential, Kraft, Benckiser, Coca-Cola, and others to create and amplify authentic influencer content. Stay tuned. We're going to get into it right after the BizDev theme song. Stay with me.
BizDev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. BizDev Live, weekdays at Eastern Time. BizD with C, brought to you by Cameron T. BizD with C, brought to you by Cameron T. This is business development, not even selling it. This is intelligent. If you watch it, I promise you benefit. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration. BizDev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. BizDev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. BizD with C, brought to you by Cameron T. BizD with C, brought to you by Cameron T.
Aliza Freud, CEO at SheSpeaks. Aliza is founder and CEO of SheSpeaks. SheSpeaks is the leading influencer marketing and media platform connecting brands with female consumers. Aliza and her team helps brands like Hershey's, Prudential, Kraft, Benckiser, Coca-Cola, and others create and amplify authentic influencer content. The SheSpeaks platform reaches over 300 million consumers monthly, powered by an amazing community of hundreds of thousands of influential women. Prior to founding SheSpeaks, Aliza worked at American Express, leading branding and marketing initiatives globally. She is a graduate of Columbia Business School's Executive MBA program. Thank you, Aliza, for being on the program today.
My pleasure. Good to be here. And I love your theme song. It's great.
Oh, thank you very much. So I want to get right into this. How did you come up with this concept, and maybe kind of give us a little bit of your background and historical context in creating SheSpeaks?
Sure. Well, as you mentioned in the bio, I really have only worked at two different places my entire career. I like to think of myself as a marathoner. I like to kind of go and do something for a long period of time. So the first part of my career, I spent at American Express doing all different kinds of marketing, product development, messaging, communications, all of that. And then I really just had this hankering to be an entrepreneur and to kind of do my own thing. But I had a nice job. I really loved working at Amex. So it took me a bit of time to kind of figure out, well, what was I going to leave a great place like American Express to kind of go off and do my own thing for? So it took me a little bit of time to really determine what the idea was. And when I launched SheSpeaks, back in 2008, the goal was really to create a research and insights platform for brands. So I'd been on the brand side, obviously, for all of my career up until that point, and I knew that the online digital environment could really change the way that brands access consumers to get feedback and insights from them. So when we originally devised the idea and the business plan behind SheSpeaks, it was a research and insights company. So we were partnering with brands who were trying to understand what was going on in the hearts and minds of women. We did product testing, we did message testing, we did formulation testing, all sorts of different types of research, both quantitative and qualitative research. And we did that all through our platform. But what we figured out pretty early on was that a lot of the women who were joining to be a part of our research panel to, test products and to give their feedback about them were what you would know influencers. These were women who had blogs. They were very active in social media, certainly before other people were active in social media. Okay. Again, we're talking back in 2008, 2009. Right. And so what we realized was, maybe there's another opportunity within the community that we're building to not only ask people to try products, but if they like them, let's say, would they write about them on their blog? Would they write about them in social media? And that's really where it started to evolve. And if you fast forward to where we are today, the majority of what we spend our time doing in terms of client work is really in the what's called influencer marketing space, where we have this very large community of women from around the country. And what they do is based on what we know about them and what their social profiles look like, what kind of content they create. We know a lot about who they are. We then match them up with the brands that we work with to help create content, sponsored content, and then we amplify and distribute that content so that lots of people get to see it.
That's amazing. And how have you developed the trust that goes along with this? Because I know I went on the website the other day and, you're asking for a birth date and, that kind of stuff to sign up for the site. So how have you developed that trust and bond with your community in order to get that type of engagement with your influencers and with folks that are, kind of being fed into the funnel, so to speak?
Yeah, and I really appreciate that you've picked that up in terms of your interactions on the platform on SheSpeaks, because one of the things that we really pride ourselves with is the building and the cultivating of this community. One of the benefits of where we started, which is really as a research and insights company, is that we learned very quickly the value of asking a person, a consumer, a woman in this case, what she thinks about something. There's an enormous amount of affinity that you can build with with another person when you just take the time to stop and ask them what they think. And I think that because that research and insights and questioning and asking our community what's on their minds, and we do this still today. We do surveys. We're running surveys all the time. We actually just completed and released the 7th wave of our coronavirus study. As well as the 2nd wave of our social unrest study, which is really focused on what's going on around the country in terms of protesting and all of the other, everything associated with that. And because we have this really kind of built into how we think about everything, how we even think about client programs, every single thing we do starts with insight first. And it's the virtue of asking our community what they think about something and letting them know. We go back to them and we say, here's what we heard you say. There's an enormous amount of relationship building that happens in just those types of interactions. And I think it's what allows us to build the community, to have we have a very engaged community. People take surveys for us that we don't compensate people for taking surveys. And we put out a survey and we'll get thousands of responses in a very short period of time, which is, why we think it's, very much our responsibility to kind of mirror back, not just to our community, but to other people broadly, to our clients, to the press, to whoever it is, what women have to say. So that is a very big part of how we build that strong relationship with the community.
So what are you doing with your community that builds that trust and that willingness to provide that information? I also want to put a pin in it. I think I want to get an answer to this question, but I also want to see what kind of insights that you've gotten from the COVID surveys and that sort of thing. But what is creating that level of trust and engagement where people are feeling comfortable answering these surveys? Like you said, you're not compensating them directly. So what value are you giving to your audience that makes them willing to do this?
I mean, honestly, I think it's very much that we just listen and we let them know that we've heard. So it's not just going out and saying, hey, take this survey, take this survey. There's a way that we do that. And then we are very meticulous in terms of how we come back to people. We always come back and say, hey, you took you took the time to give us your feedback about this topic. We wanted to get back to you and let you know, here are the 3 to 4 things that we heard in this survey that we thought you would find interesting. So we always go back and kind of close that loop to make sure that people understand.
So if I understand this correctly, so you're giving those insights back to them. So they participated in a survey, and then you're providing specific information, not just a data dump, but specific information that you'll think would be interesting to that specific person or group of people.
Yes, that's right. And another thing that we do is we take the insight. So we had started to see with these COVID surveys that women were feeling extremely isolated. They were feeling very anxious and stuck, not able to, they wanted to do things in their lives, but they were feeling very low motivation levels. So
it sent chills up my spine, because we had those conversations, me and my wife, and she definitely was on that. I think we've moved a little past that, but definitely right on point with what she was feeling, especially at the beginning of this whole thing.
Yes, and that was a very common theme in terms of what we were hearing from the community. So what we did was we went out and we found this amazing woman within our community who is a coach, but she really is sort of a mindset coach. And we approached her and said, "Listen, this is what we're hearing in these surveys. Would you do a talk with us? Would you get on a Facebook Live with us that we'll broadcast out?" We've about 65,000 or so followers on our Facebook, just on our Facebook community. Yeah. And we said, this is something that's really important to kind of help our women kind of get some tools. Like, how do you deal with the stress? How do you deal with the anxiety? And how do you deal with the lack of motivation? So we spent, a 45 minutes to an hour chatting with this amazing coach, and she helped give people some great tips. And our community, because it's Facebook Live, I'm sure you can ask questions directly. We were able to get her to answer some questions on the spot from the community members. So it's that kind of stuff that we ask you for your insights as a community member. We come back to you and say, here's what we heard you say. And then in the instances like what I just described, where we feel like, gosh, there's something that we need to do to help here, we try to create an environment or an opportunity for people to get some tips and get some help. And that's another thing I think that really makes it feel like, wow, there's something going on. It's not just me putting my opinion and it's going into this black hole. There's something going on with it. So it's a big part of how we cultivate community.
That's awesome. So talk to me about some of the success and some of the challenges of building this business. Now, what year did SheSpeaks.com start?
Well, officially, it was really 2008. When we started, we were beta testing in 2007. But really, we started going in 2008. And it was, it was at that point that we, kind of started. We saw what was working. We did more of what was working, did less of what wasn't working. I mean, like any entrepreneur, that's that's one of the things that you really have to understand to kind of build and grow a business is, being able to be really thoughtful about what is working and what's not, and then trying to dial up the things that are, kind of not doing as much of the things that are not, and really learning how do you create a business that makes money and you can grow over time. So that was certainly something that I think is a learning curve. I had never, obviously, I worked at a big company.
What was the business model as you were starting up?
The business model was always that we were going to, our clients were going to be the brands, the companies that we offered these research and insight survey and the tools that we have. We offered that up to clients. They paid us a fee for not just access to the tools, but access to the community and then the analytics of all of that. So it was basically like market research they might do in different ways. And because we have tools that do both, like quantitative, like studies, like research studies. That tool is coupled with an online tool that is more of like a focus group, like an online focus group. We are able to do both the quantitative, but is also augment that with qualitative, or even just do qualitative.
So you got a lot going on here, right? So there's a lot of dynamics to it. When you started up, and I know you said you went through beta, has anything significantly changed in the way that you do business and the way that you charge and the way that you handle your organization from when you started? Because I imagine, hearing somebody starting a business in 2007 and knowing that, in hindsight, 2009 is only, a year and a half, 2 years away, and you're going through the financial crisis. I imagine that shook things up a bit. And then now moving forward, going through some years where I'm assuming that there was some success and some good stuff, but you're growing, right? So you got all those things, because now you're a business that's 13 years old, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me. I feel like that is one of the things as an entrepreneur that you have to really be good at. You have to be able to kind of understand what's happening in a given moment, know what your wheelhouse is, so to speak. What is it that you're good at? What is it that what assets do you deliver for a client? And that's why, as I said earlier, we started as a research and an insights company, but then we saw that there was a real interesting shift to companies wanting to tap into digital for marketing purposes,
right?
Not just market research, but marketing. And that shift is one that really kind of helped us, because
you went from just being a sort of marketing analytics, we're going to tell you what the market is feeling and what is sort of going on, to a company where not only were you analyzing what was going on in the market, but now you have these influencers, and now you're influencing the market as well and tracking that progress.
That's right. That's right. That we started very much as research, and going out and asking the target, that the client was interested in getting access to, these target women. We'd ask them questions. We'd ask them to test things. We'd ask them to give feedback. But that's very much a market research type of offering. But what we realized is that we built this amazing community of women who were what you now call influencers. So they weren't just, the women. It wasn't just like, oh, we could access this one woman in our community. We could see, because, as you fill out a profile, you tell us about yourself, you connect your social platforms to your profile, so we can see that you have, X number of followers on Instagram, that you have what your social footprint looks like. And we realize that there's an enormous value in bringing that to bear for our clients, because these women really understand how to create messaging that appeals to their audience. So right. It became really much, it evolved to being much more of a marketing, communication, and media solution for clients versus just market research. And today we are much more in the, creation of content, marketing messaging, and then distribution, media, the media push of that content than we are research. But the DNA of the company is very much about insights. So even when we're being hired just to do these influencer marketing campaigns where the influencers are creating content and then we're distributing that content from a media standpoint, even when that's the assignment, we always start with the research, because that is what makes the content good. That's what
awesome.
Makes the messaging right. And that's what makes the distribution of it work correctly.
That's awesome. What is your advice for somebody that's getting started? You've worked with some amazing brands. Um, Maybe you can kind of incorporate some of your history, like some of the brands that you started with, obviously coming from American Express. That's
Yeah.
a huge brand, and you probably had some relationships there to get you started. But for companies that are starting out, they want to land some
Yeah.
of these big contracts and big brands and big companies. And I think everybody wants to be associated. And I've heard advice lots of different ways, everything from, doing work for free to, going after your relationships and, you know, hiring
Yeah.
folks that have relationships,
Yeah.
lots of different ways. What was your strategy, and what things have been effective for you?
Look, I mean, I will say that it is ignorance is bliss a little bit when for me, it was when I was starting a business. I just believed in what we were offering. And so it felt very easy for me to be able to go in and talk to a potential client and explain to them what they were going to get in terms of value. I will say that we did not, American Express was not a client of ours probably until 2010. So it wasn't like right out of the gate, they were like, oh, you're starting a business. And these, obviously I had great relationships there, made, great friends working at the company, but it's a business. They can't just come and say, oh, here's a budget. We like you. We're going to have you go off and do this. We had to be able to kind of get some experience under our belt and be able to articulate what the value was that we would bring to a company like American Express. So in some ways, it was actually really good that I didn't have American Express as one of my first clients. It took a bit of time to kind of be able to explain what the value was to a company like Amex. And so the way we started was really just, yes, I'd built some contacts because I'd been at a big company, and I met people over the course of my career. And I just started reaching out to people I knew and said, this is what I'm doing. Do you know anyone who could get that value from it? And our first couple of clients paid us not very much. But they figured, well, we'll give it a shot. Why not? We made it, pretty easy for them to give us the opportunity. And then, but we knew that we needed to use that as a case study. So when I started, yes, I did have a few clients, so to speak, who, we created a relationship when he said, listen, you give us what we need to get started to do this. We'll basically do it at no cost to you, almost no cost to you. But you need to allow us to use it as a case study. So that's kind of how we were able to build the foundation of, okay, here are clients who are able to speak to what the value was of what we were doing. And it just kind of grew from there. But there's no question that when you start, especially in a business like ours, where we are, our clients are big companies, you have to get creative. You have to say, all right, well, if I do this, if I have, obviously I was self-funding. So it wasn't like I had this enormous pile of cash from an investor that I could just kind of keep testing into things. I had to know pretty quickly that the business model was going to work. I felt that it would, but we needed a couple of clients that would come on board with us, give us a shot, and then be willing to kind of speak to the value. And that's how it grew. It was, okay, we had these first couple of clients. They allowed us to speak about the value. They gave us testimonials, and then that opened doors to other clients. And then it goes from there. When you do good work, hopefully that makes the business development part of what you have to do. It kind of helps, give some air cover for that, so that you're not doing so much heavy lifting on the business development side. Now, that's not to say there aren't times where you have to dial up your business development efforts and be smart about it. But what we've learned over the years is what are the things that we need to do in order to get people interested in our product and service. But that's something that you learn over time, and is certainly not something I knew out of the gate. That was definitely trial and error. Like, okay,
Right.
what do I do to dial this up?
Right. So I know that. So you brought some clients on board, low cost at that point to build the case studies. At that point, did you already have a team? And like, where are you now with like folks that are working for the organization, contractors versus full time, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, we have, I'm very lucky that I kind of knew early on when I started who I wanted to have work for me. Another part of what we do, I mean, there is a mission associated with SheSpeaks as a company. Our mission has always been to help provide women with a stage to be heard. And that's always been our commitment to our community, that we're going to take what she does, what she says, and make sure it gets out to a larger audience than maybe she could have done on her own.
I love that.
She is an influencer herself, because she obviously has her audience, but we also have an audience that is probably complementary to that and larger, and adds more to her access to other women, but also to the brands. I mean, our clients pay money they pay us, and we pay the influencers to create content. It's, one of the things that I truly love about what we do, because a lot of the influencers that we work with today, some of the most successful influencers that are, female influencers, social media influencers out there, were looking for some flexibility. They didn't want to just, they maybe were having kids. They didn't want to just be going into an office from 9 to 5. And it's that same group of women that we serve as a company from influencer standpoint, or a lot of the women that I was able to bring on to our staff. So while we are very committed to making sure that our team has flexibility, especially, I mean, we've always been this way. Yes, we've had a physical office where people could come to if they, were able to get to an office, but we've always been a team that is distributed across the country. I have people in California, I have people in Arkansas, I have people in Georgia, I have people in New Jersey, I have people in New York. We have people kind of all over the place, but the common theme of what we've tried to do is say, look, we know that these women have an enormous amount of skill and ability to bring to the table. How do we facilitate that in a way that allows them to have the flexibility to be with their family, their kids, whatever it is, but also be able to bring that value to a company? So that's always been, it not only is it the way that we think about our influencer community, because it very much is, but it's also a way that we think about the people that work on our team. So having that ability, flexibility, and it's one of the reasons that when COVID started, and people went on, under these stay-at-home orders, we really didn't skip a beat. I mean, our team was very used to working virtually, and being in touch with each other. So we do more Zoom calls now than we did before.
Everybody, right?
Which is, but I actually kind of like it. It's interesting because, it's a chance to see each other, and while, maybe before we were doing those as conference calls, like regular conference calls, now we do them as like Zoom conversations. And there's something really, there's something different about that than just hearing somebody's voice over the phone.
Well, so, I know for me, seeing somebody like I'm seeing you right now, being able to get some eye contact, even if it's through the camera, right, knowing that you're engaged and you're with me, versus on the phone with me, taking care of whatever you got on your desks, the email, the family member that's coming to you. There's a little bit more preparation that goes into like, okay, I'm going to be here and with you in the moment.
Yeah.
I think, the culture around it, like I've heard the horror stories, one of my female friends colleagues who was doing a training. They had her doing like 8-hour training sessions on Zoom, and that's like the nightmare sort of piece of it. But I think one of the greatest understandings that's coming out of feminist culture and workplace laws that are more fair and inclusive is this understanding that it doesn't work for a woman, but it also doesn't work for a man. Like it doesn't work. Like there's certain things that you do, hours that you work in the week, demands that you place on people. They just don't work across the board.
Right.
And luckily we have some very strong women now that are speaking up towards it, and some men that are getting out of the way and letting women get that work done, which I think is extremely important. When you talk about what's going on now and what's going to go on in the future, what do you see being like maybe the cultural change coming out of this? When the vaccine comes in 2021 and life goes back to some semblance of normal, schools open up again. I know a lot of moms are ready for schools to open. Very, very ready. What are you seeing as the things that will drive the next, sort of major influencer thing? What's going to drive your business forward? What's driving your business forward now with all of these changes?
Well, in terms of the changes, I'd say that there's no question that we're human beings and we seek to engage with one another. And yes, while Zoom and being virtual is definitely something that I think has helped a lot of companies understand that their teams could be virtual, or maybe they didn't think that before. I don't think that there's anything that replaces the in-person. So I don't think we're ever going to, I don't think the norm is going to be everyone's virtual in terms of, how we engage with each other. It's all going to be virtual. I think people crave in-person contact. There's no question. And there's nothing that replaces that energy that you get from being with somebody physically in the same space. So I do think that we'll have changes, certainly for a lot of big companies, or a lot of companies generally, but maybe bigger companies that never thought that they could have virtual teams. You will have a lot more of that, which will be a wonderful change for people. I do agree that there's probably some work that, and certain types of jobs there you need to be in person. But from a workplace standpoint, I do think you're going to see a lot of change there in terms of people being much more willing, corporations being much more willing to let people be virtual. So that's, I think, a positive.
It's amazing because some of those changes are already taking place and you're sort of seeing different stances on, and there's a study for everybody, right? I mean, you're in this business of the surveys and metrics, and there's a survey that supports, people working together in a physical space. There's a survey that says, or metrics that support people working outside the office. But then it comes down to, what are you doing? What's the benefits of working virtually? What's the benefits of working together? What kind of work are you producing? For people in general, I think this is going to be a fantastic thing. I know it's shaking up the education system. How much of this do we need to show up for? How much can we do online? How much information and work is really necessary? What are better ways of learning? And you certainly see that in the workplace. I'm sort of interested in what you're seeing in terms of the marketing and branding, how you think that's going to be affected by folks being online more, maybe. And then also because people are online more and, advertisements, Facebook, internet ads are being more often than not silenced and blocked and that sort of thing. How much more is going to the influencer market? I'm sort of also interested in the breakdown of your relationships. Like, where are your folks at? I know you have a tremendous Facebook audience. But are you guys dealing with influencers that are on TikTok? Are
Mhm.
you dealing with influencers that are on LinkedIn? So twofold question here, but
Yeah.
how are you sort of dealing with the challenges of the online, people are going online, so it presents that huge opportunity of potentialized, but also the dual thing with the more people go online, the more tools people are using to avoid advertising altogether. And then, where you're advertising, and obviously it's definitely the future. You're a lot more organic,
Yeah.
influencer marketing, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I would say that the majority of the work that we do is really B2C. So big companies that are looking to access, a consumer. So, you mentioned some of the examples of the companies that we work with. We might be working with a brand that is, a cosmetic brand that is interested in getting direct access or getting access through us, through the influencers to that target consumer who might buy their product. So we are definitely much more in the B2C space versus B2B in terms of like businesses, business to business marketing. So really, we're in the B2C space. And when you're in the B2C space, you have to be on the social platforms. And that's the ones that where there's attention, right? The way that I think about it is where is consumer attention? They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, they're on TikTok, they're on Pinterest, they're on these platforms, on these social platforms. What you need to understand though is that you communicate differently on each of those platforms, and what might work really well on Instagram is not going to work well on TikTok, or and vice versa. So we don't use LinkedIn as much, and probably not surprising because it is certainly still considered much more of a B2B platform. I will say though, with that in mind, we do have influencers who are active on LinkedIn, and we will, depending on the product, occasionally have those influencers activate on LinkedIn. But I would say the majority of what we're doing is very much focused on B2C, so a business going directly or trying to access directly to a target consumer for their customer for their product. And I would say, to answer your question about what's changing, one of the things that we've seen a huge shift is in people shopping online, right? Not that people weren't shopping online before, of course they were, but where one of the areas that were holdouts was in the grocery category, right? People weren't shopping as much online; they were just going to run over to the supermarket. With now with what's happened with COVID and people being under stay-at-home orders, what we found is you have a lot more people who are willing and interested in doing online grocery ordering. So they're ordering online, and they're either having it delivered to them, or they're going and doing pickup outside of the store. So that has seen a huge increase in terms of, everyday consumers using it. And that, if you're a marketer of one of, let's say let's say you're, craft, and you sell a coffee product, right? You could now be thinking, well, I've been doing a lot of in-store promotion or things to drive people into the store to go buy it. Now maybe I should be thinking about, how am I going to do online and digital marketing to get you to go and order that product and put it in your, online grocery order or, your delivery order. So that's where we've seen a lot of shift too, in terms of, the consumer behavior, which then impacts how the marketer is going to market the product.
I love that. I was just showing off some of the website and Facebook and Instagram for folks that want to come and follow you on these platforms.
Yeah. Great.
She Speaks Up on Instagram, by the way. I love those insights. I think we're seeing those trends, both on the micro and the macro within, our own houses. And then you're seeing it in the news, how much the demand for pickup and drop off services are, buying groceries online. Sort of interestingly, even, products for folks that are sort of really interested in the dynamics of the market. We're in a pandemic, the economy's a little shaky, but people are buying more Teslas than ever. It's, I know the average person is not buying a Tesla,
Right.
but there is a certain level of folks that have the money, and they're the ones that buy Teslas regardless. It was sort of interesting going through the financial downturn, 2008, 2009, the companies that sold to a certain market, BMW, they're always used to going out and finding their customers, reaching out and bringing their customers in the door. Walmart suffered because they were used to folks just walking through their front door and buying things. And when people are short on money, they don't do that. But for companies that were going after an influential market, which regardless of where the markets were and where the economy was, had money in their pocket, they could still find customers for their products. I think that's really important now for any business that's not on social media to understand, being able to reach out, being able to tap into the markets. For somebody that might not be able to afford your services, hopefully we'll get some folks that can't afford your services and are giving you a call and definitely reaching out to you, whether they want to just be more influential online or they want to reach a female market. But for folks that might not be at that place, they're just starting their business, how would you recommend they start building community online and building their commercial appeal and their outreach towards customers?
I mean, honestly, I think that there's no better time to be a company, especially with what's happened. So there are over 8 million businesses that are, and many of those, the large portion of those are small businesses that are currently marketing on Facebook/Instagram, right? Because Instagram's owned by Facebook, and seeing great success with that, right? Because it's anybody can kind of create their own Facebook page. They can create content. They can go after their target their target customer there. I think that there is no better time to be starting a business than now. Now, what happened with Facebook is that, the way that their CPM or their cost per thousand, right? If you're going and buying access to their audience works, and you can be very targeted, right? And who you go after there. The way that number, that CPM, has gone down considerably since the pandemic started. So, and the reason is a lot of marketers pulled back their budgets, right? So you had COVID start. A lot of marketers were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have to, this is the economy is going to crash. We got to be conserving our budget. So many of them pulled back from advertising on Facebook, on Instagram, right? What happens when there is less demand and Facebook still has the same supply. In fact, if anything, they have more supply because their engagement rates went up significantly during the pandemic. Because what's everyone doing? Everyone's at home using their phone, and looking on social media. So their engagement rates went up.
Extremely healthy behavior in a pandemic. Yes.
Well, I mean, I'm not, that's a different topic.
I know. It's just such an interesting thing, but it's what people do. They're finding things to fill their time.
That's right. Exactly. So, so engagement rates went up significantly on the social platforms, but advertisers were pulling back from advertising. So you have the demand going down in terms of the Facebook and Instagram from an advertising standpoint. So the CPMs went down. So if I were a brand, and that's what was already going on. Now you have the Facebook boycott going on, which I'm sure you've heard. You can't turn on the news and not hear about it. And what that's done is it's going to even further impact, because it's a bidding system, right? That's technically what it is when you're buying ads on Facebook. So if there are fewer people bidding, then your CPM rate is going to go down. So we had already been saying that if you were a brand and you wanted to gain share,
right,
no matter what your product is, you should be doubling down on the social platforms. We've been saying this through the pandemic. Now that there's the boycott, those CPMs are just naturally going to come down even further because the demand is going down. So if you're a small business and you are looking to get in front of your target audience, working with influencers to get in front of them and using, getting access to their audience, getting access to their know-how of creating content about your product or service, now is a great time to be out there doing it, because you can just go online, you can look at Facebook, you can look at Instagram, you can look at the social platforms and see who's already talking about the product or the category that you have a product for, and that target audience, and so who follows that influencer, who's following that influencer, and there's no reason you cannot reach out to those influencers directly on your own. There's DMing, direct messaging on these platforms. You can reach out if you go on, you see somebody who you think looks good and they could be a good fit for you. Direct message them, ask them, say, hey, listen, I work at XYZ. This is the company the product that I have, the company I work for, and I would love to talk to you about whether you might be interested in working with me and do a sponsored post, post, or some, whether that's a video, an image-based post, there's so many different options, but there's no reason that if you're a small business and you don't have a big budget to go work with a company to do this on your behalf, there's no reason you cannot do it on your own. And
I love that. Yeah. The female-owned business I was talking to the other day, she has a jewelry company. She has a website. She has the capacity to sell online. I was like, start reaching out to influencers, send stuff out to them, ask them to do some posts on your stuff. Great way. What's your opinion on organic content versus paid content?
Well, everything we do is paid in some capacity, because the influencer might be paid to create the content, and then push it out on their Facebook or on their Instagram account. So from the standpoint that the content is being paid to be created, it's a sponsored piece of content, so it's being paid to be created. That's a paid component for us. However,
but you do it kind of organic through your own social media sites, don't you?
We do, but it's always an augmentation with influencers. So, clients, because we have such a large community and following of our own, we can augment what we're doing on clients' behalf, but clients are coming to us to access our influencers, our know-how of creating this content and then distributing the content, making sure that lots of people get to see it. So there's the creation of the content, which for us, the influencers are compensated for what they do because they're doing the work, they're creating this content. They will then post it. Let's say, we use an influencer to talk about a food product. The influencer creates that content. She might then push it out on her Instagram. But if you understand how Facebook or Instagram or any of these platforms, how the algorithm works, only a small portion of their audience actually gets to see that. And there are ways to increase that organic reach, right? You have to understand how the platforms work. There are ways to increase that organic reach, but somebody has 1 million followers on Instagram and they create a post and they push it out on their own. They never do 1 million people of their followers see it, right? The way that you get more followers to see it is by doing paid. So you have the earned part of it, right? The organic earned media, what you call earned media part, that happens from when that person creates the content and pushes it out, right? They just push it out on their and
then Facebook sends you a thing. Oh, you can get this much more reach if you pay this amount of money.
That's right. So that's boosting or amplifying, and there are other ways, or different ways to do that, and that tends to also be another way that we augment the reach. So we might test X number of different influencers who are pushing content out. We then watch to see, okay, who's organically getting engagement with that content? Who's organically reaching people, and what message is resonating best? And then we might choose, let's say there are 5 people, right? And we usually work with more than 5, but let's say there's 5. We, like, 2 of them are killing it. Their content's doing really well. Organically, it's working great. They're getting lots of engagement and content. People are sharing it, all of that. We then say, okay, here are two of the people who are doing really well. Let's do some paid, some amplifying and boosting of this content to their audience to get a larger part of their audience to see it. So that's where that paid element comes into play.
I love it. What is the formula that you would give to somebody? Let's say they're, just getting started. They have influencers reaching out to them because they have a good product or service, and they're saying, hey, I'd like to work with you. Can you give me free product? Or, maybe there's a situation where the business wants to reach out to an influencer. What is the formula for payment? Like, if I'm reaching out to somebody, what makes sense? Is there a formula? You got $1 million, so I'm going to pay you this percentage, that sort of thing.
The pricing is all over the place. So it is I tell people all the time, there is really not a very specific formula for it. There are some guidelines, but different influencers charge different amounts. So I would say my best advice is you go pick a couple people who you think you like, right? When you do your research, find a couple of people you like, reach out to them and say, hey, listen, this is what this is my product. I would love for you to create a post. If you want video, you say, I want video, whatever it is that you're asking, say, here's the request. What would you charge me to do something like this? And that's the best way to handle the fee element of it, because you can do it different ways for sure. But I would recommend that if you're starting out, you have a business, you want to see, you want to build some momentum for your product. I would ask people what they charge, because there is no hard set rule. It's not, even if you think about like CPMs, right? The cost per thousand of buying access on any digital platform, on Facebook, on any of these platforms, CPM rates are all over the place, right? Yes, there might be some rules of thumb, but they also fluctuate. So because of the fact that there is great variability between what different influencers charge, what you need to do is say, okay, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. This is my product. This is what I would love for you. What do you think? And work with them. See if you can create a relationship that works for you. And if you reach out to a few influencers, I'd say that there's a very good chance you'll certainly get a hit with one or two of them to start with, and then you see what works.
And I kind of imagine that you can see if this lines up with your experience. Unless you're reaching out to Kim Kardashian, most folks are very flattered to get that kind of communication, like, hey, can you work with my brand? I'd like to work with you. I imagine most influencers are pretty flattered to get that request.
They certainly entertain it. I will say that there are influencers who are so inundated with requests that, it's hard for them to get. There's a whole lot of variability in terms of like the spectrum of influencers. There's so many people out there. So I wouldn't get discouraged if someone doesn't get back to you. Like, don't be upset if you say, well, wait, why didn't that person get back to me? It really does depend. And some of them also, remember, some of them do sign exclusivity clauses with their clients. So if they already have a jewelry brand they're working with and they might have some exclusivity, they may not be able to work with you. So it doesn't, I would try a few people, reach out to them and test. Say to yourself, okay, I'm going to allocate a certain amount of budget to test into this to see what's going to work for me.
I love that.
And then track it, really be smart about it. It's like anything else in marketing, right? You always want to test anything we do in marketing.
I feel like we could spend a whole hour long just talking about how people should track this stuff. I know I'm because I've gotten into this Biz Dev Live and we're doing daily, like, okay, now seeing what the progress is, what are you doing right with the SEO? What are you doing right with keywords? What are you doing right? There's so much. And then A/B testing, which is a whole nother thing. I read Timothy Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, years ago, and still applying, and just that whole A/B section, like, still, it blows my mind. And I know I should be doing it, and I'm still not doing it. So it's like, all right, what do I do to get to that level where you're going out and really testing things with your product and your brand in a really specific and meaningful way that actually produces metrics that helps your business. Before we go, I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you so that you can help them out with all those metric things, because that's a big challenge. And I know you have the solutions there to help people out. How should people reach out to you? What's the best way to reach out to you? And, who are you looking to work with?
Well, we work with all different types of companies. We work with financial services companies. We work with consumer packaged goods companies, with cosmetic brands, like food brands. We're kind of all across the board in terms of the types of companies we work with. Obviously, the common theme is that they have a female target, and we're really good at figuring out how do you motivate a female consumer, doing it the way that we do, which is by really tapping into the power of influencers and their networks. So in terms of who, we work with all different kinds of brands. So it really is a matter of, making sure that we are probably a good fit for a particular company. The way that people can get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn. I think I just saw you had my LinkedIn profile.
Yes, that's right.
I'm Aliza Freud on LinkedIn, so you can feel free to reach out to me there. And I would also say, if you wanted to reach out to us to potentially understand more about what we do and see if it's a good fit, you can email me directly, and I will make sure that we find the expert in that area that can touch base with you. But if you want to email me directly, I'm Aliza, so it's ALIZA at SheSpeaks.com. So it's pretty simple.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing this, Aliza.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So I encourage people to go to SheSpeaks.com, sign up for the Facebook group, get involved with SheSpeaks. It's such an amazing thing. I think, even being a 13-year-old company, you're on the cutting edge. And I think people need to understand that, whatever company you are nowadays, you're a media company. And I think you're right there with that. So I really appreciate what you're doing in the marketplace. I'm gonna let you have the last word, say goodbye, and then we'll get into the Biz Dev theme song to play us out.
No, I appreciate that. And I think that you made a really good point there. Companies have to think of themselves as media companies, especially now that they're able to build their own direct relationship with their target audience, which in all the years of advertising before this, it was really hard to do that. There's never been a better time to be able to do that. So I think that insight you had of think of yourself as a media company is really smart advice. So thank you for having me on. And it was great to talk to you and your audience.
Oh, thank you very much. All right, guys, we'll be back tomorrow.
Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. This is business development, not even selling it. This is intelligent. If you watch it, I promise you benefit. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration. Leadership and motivation, empathy and inspiration. Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz Dev Live, weekdays at 11 Eastern Time. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T. Biz D with C, brought to you by Cameron T.